What if I told you that you should break up with Valentine's Day? Hear me out. So I'm here with these beautiful roses that are my favorite color. These are beautiful, like lilac-y, purplish pink roses. And January is almost over with. And if you go to any major store, they're already pushing Valentine's Day. So you're gonna see all of these huge displays full of chocolates, maybe champagne, definitely lots of things that are in red and pink, teddy bears, plushes, lingerie, any kind of collections that they can offer up for the occasion. But have we stopped to think, why are we participating in Valentine's Day? Now, this video is being made at the end of January 2025, and January has been a very long year, especially if you are American or affected by America, which is a lot of people, right? Specifically when something like this happens. Maybe day-to-day stuff, if you're not American, generally does not matter, but now it kind of matters. Point being, though, I think that in this era where we are doing a lot of very strategic boycotting, where we are becoming aware of and questioning the patterns of consumerism that, again, especially Westerners, especially people in the UK, especially Americans and Canadians, have habitually taken part in, right? Going shopping for a lot of people is stress relief or a hobby or just a normal thing to do all the time. And in all of this process of becoming aware of our politics, becoming aware of what our society enforces, becoming aware of the role that we play in all of these things, we are boycotting more things and we are changing things. I think there, however, is a lot of resistance around changing our traditions. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. One of the best examples, I think, of traditions changing is more and more people opting out of Thanksgiving, because we realize that Thanksgiving is not what they told us it was when we were in school. Oh, the natives and the pilgrims had a wonderful little feast together, and the pilgrims were taught by the natives how to grow corn, and the pilgrims threw a party to say thank you. That's not what happened. It was a genocide. And a lot more people, again, not only are understanding that that's the origin of the holiday, but to participate in a holiday reifies and reaffirms its actual purpose and meaning, even if that meaning is not something that is obviously said, right? Nobody is necessarily saying explicitly, we don't like Native Americans when they celebrate Thanksgiving. But because that is the origin of the holiday, whether you know this or not, if you follow the holiday, you are taking part in a ritual that reaffirms the original event. That's the nature of it. I know that on this side of YouTube, there are a lot of people who understand that sometimes large events can be rituals, and not everybody who is involved in this ritual is aware of this event. Holidays, holy days, are the same thing. So, back to Valentine's Day. I may ask you, who is Saint Valentine? I'll give you some time to answer. I want you to answer to me, who is Saint Valentine and what does he mean to you? Now, regardless of whether or not you know Saint Valentine's history, the reason that we still participate in celebrating this Christian martyr, whether you're Christian or not, whether you even care about martyrs or not, whether that has anything to do with $13.99 stuffed teddy bears, is that this holiday takes the place of a previous kind of spring love holiday that the ancient Greeks celebrated. Are you Greek? You might not even be Greek. So here we go, celebrating other people's holidays. The thing is, we run into a similar issue. When I talk to people about not celebrating Thanksgiving, one of the things that people have to understand is like Thanksgiving is not like a global, universal thing. And it is a choice to opt in or opt out. And a lot of the resistance around opting out of Thanksgiving comes from the fact that it is in a very external way, it is the opportunity that people have the day that they are federally given off to go and visit their family, eat with them. On a very human level, it takes place on a harvest day. So it takes the place of a harvest festival in the West, in America. That's what Thanksgiving is doing. And that's why when we say you shouldn't celebrate Thanksgiving, it's got all these wonderful bastions because it has people clutching their pearls going, when am I going to see my family? When are we going to eat? We have all of these foods, all of these recipes. It's when we spend time with family. It's our harvest. It's da 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 da. And my counter argument is it doesn't have to be. What I tend to do, this is just a little digression, but an example that we're going to get into later, is I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the beginning of November. I actually celebrate a harvest day earlier in November. So some people kind of get towards this when they start celebrating like Friendsgiving. And again, it's difficult because some people like don't have the option to get other days off. This can be something that we have to work towards, but we do need to like make these changes as a society. And I would say still keep your stuffing, your sweet potatoes, your all of this stuff, and move it to another day so that you are literally not celebrating in that energy on the same day of this ritual. So when I talk about you should break up with Valentine's Day, this is the same energy that I'm taking into Valentine's Day. Now, Valentine's Day is not associated with a genocide, there is that, but there is actually the current day problem of the fact that it is associated with millions and millions of tons of waste. Every year, tons and tons of plastic and chocolate are wasted for the sake of consumerism. And there are a lot of conversations about how capitalism uses drives like romance, marriage, partnership, social value as seen through the lens of those things to push their marketing for things like weddings and Valentine's Day. This is a huge money bag for them, especially because the way that Valentine's Day exists nowadays has nothing to do with a Christian martyr. And you could say that it has something to do with Cupid exchanging gifts, as if to say, you've got me shot by Cupid's arrow, I've got my eye on you, I really like you, I have a crush, here's a little token of my affection. No, there's nothing really wrong with that. There is, however, something wrong with enshrining this particular holiday as something where if you don't spend money on a person, you don't like them, they think that you don't like them, you might be in trouble in your relationship, XYZ. And I think I and a lot of other people have issues where you're expecting something from people in such a tender area of life. No one should ever feel coerced or expected to share something with somebody of that nature just because it's an official holiday. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the chocolates that we associated with Valentine's Day these days. That's, somewhat fairly new phenomenon, but it is again a huge market. Well, here's the thing. The chocolate market, the chocolate trade is full of exploitation and child labor. Full of exploitation and child labor. So you have the cocoa industry where very commonly children are being used to harvest the cacao and process it and then sell it to European nations who turn it into chocolate bars, at which point it starts to make a lot more money. The people who are harvesting that chocolate generally do not see a lick of the money or the profits from what they do, their hard work, especially in cases where they're children. And companies like Nestle, for example, make bank off of Valentine's Day and the sale and the pushing of chocolate. Even though so much of that chocolate goes to waste every year, it gets thrown in a landfill despite the hardship that somebody had to go through to bring it to you, they're still making millions of dollars off of this every time you go through it. But these companies are the same companies that we have been asked to boycott for genocidal reasons. No? So why are we giving them a pass just because everything's pink? I think it's really important, on the one hand, for us to pull our purchasing power away from the powers that be. And the best way to do this is to be more critical of how we spend money and what narratives we believe about how and when to spend it. On the other hand, I think that it's also really important for us to envision a new future, and doing so and actually embodying that new future means doing things differently than we have done them in the past. And so without further ado, I present to you the Day of Flowers, or Blooming Day, whichever day name you like. So Day of Flowers is something that I started doing around 2 years ago. It's on February 13th and not the 14th, so still around the same time. February 13th, however, was chosen not only because of its proximity to the 14th, but because 13 is the number of the goddess. 13 to me is a very lucky number, but is also associated with Aphrodite and Venus. And I think that in a matriarchal way, it's also good for us to kind of reclaim the number 13 because it has been maligned with curses and witches, because that is what the patriarchy does to matriarchal power figures, to matriarchal values. It associates them with negativity and malfeasance and all this negative stuff so that people will leave behind these traditions, right? So Day of Flowers is on February 13th, and as you may have guessed, it is all about flowers. So something that I think that has fallen out of commonality in our current day society that I definitely think we should bring back is florivory, or eating of flowers. And so the Day of Flowers for me is centered around the consumption and the veneration of flowers as symbols of abundance, of promise, because where there are flowers, there will be fruits, there will be seeds. These flowers also symbolize the end of winter. So we're finally coming out of winter. February 13th is also very close to the Lunar New Year. So it is like the springy start of something new, something similar to the way that Easter is originally celebrated as well, although you don't have to wait as long. And again, if you are not Christian, then you don't have to take part in that. You can move that to this date or not, whatever. But here's my outline for a Day of Flowers. The first Day of Flowers I spent in a pueblo called Tepoztlan, and I was living there, so that's like incidental. But I went to different places and I ate and cooked a lot of flowers that day. So one of the things that I had that I love so much was a tlaltaquera, which is a pre-Hispanic food made out of like grains and seeds, plants, sometimes mushrooms, chapulines, different kinds of insects are all put together in like this little cake, like this little ball, and then cooked, fried, or grilled, and then you can serve it with a salsa. And I had actually known about these from before I moved to Mexico, and I was like really excited about eating them because that is so my kind of food interest. But when I got there to the market, they had one that was rosas con betabel, which is roses and beets, and it was served with a salsa de Jamaica, so this like tangy sorrel sauce on top. The whole thing is like dark reddish pink with a soft pink salsa. It was very sweet and delicious and just incredible and set the tone for the day. I had some rose water. I went back home and I made some quesadillas de flor de calabaza con queso. And squash blossoms are really just a fantastic food that's very common here in Mexico that's eaten. And there's a lot of florivory, which I think is amazing and wonderful. And I'm just gonna like open gush about the things that I do. So the next Day of Flowers was last year that I did, and I made gorditas and I filled them with different flowers. So one of them was flor de calabaza. Con queso. The other one was Jamaica that was kind of boiled down in a sort of savory sauce and with crema. And then I honestly can't remember the fourth one. I think I used nasturtium. I know that I used nasturtium as a garnish. Nasturtium is a peppery flower. And so the other thing I'm just going to keep bringing up is be aware of how many flowers are edible. And the fact that eating flowers have a lot of flavonols. They are where the plant tends to put its reproductive energy. So you can also get a lot of the nutrients that the plant puts into the flowers. Although in many cases, sometimes the actual reproductive parts of the flower are toxic. And so it's just the petals that are eaten. The other foods that I have included, I'm going to give you a menu. For example, this is the menu this year that I am very ambitiously telling myself that I will be able to make for a Day of Flowers. The thing about Day of Flowers, again, is it's about rebirth. It's about a restart. It's about the flourishing, and it's very much about abundance. And so as I'm talking about this, do you notice that it's not about attachments to like a person? I think that especially when we are talking about relationship anarchy and polyamory and examining our relationship to our value being determined by who wants us, one of the things I really like about starting Day of Flowers as a tradition is It actually reminds me of the saying where like true love is not two people staring at each other, but two people looking in the same direction, standing side by side. And if nothing else, what I want to be clear about Day of Flowers is it's about reconnecting with nature. It's about reconnecting with the cycles, with the seasons, with our sense of love and beauty, but not necessarily about another person. If you want to share Day of Flowers with another person, that is really beautiful. If you want to share it with a lover, if you want to share it with your family, if you want to share it with your neighbors, everyone is included. There's nothing weird about it. And as much as people want to say, oh, you can celebrate Valentine's Day with whoever, they just do that as commercially. Like Valentine's Day is really about partners. It's like Cupid's bow, it's romance. And then they've expanded it because, hey, why not? You can do it for the kids. Now kids are giving notes to each other that you need to buy from the store to sell, candies to them to give to their crush or whatever it is. There's roses that they're handed out in school. It's not like that. And so people do like Galentine's Day or whatever, but all that really does is expand the amount of people who are included in the target market for people to buy teddy bears, box chocolates, decorations, etc., etc. Anyway, so here are some activities that I've written down for Day of Flowers or Blooming Day. If you have ideas that you think would go really well with this, leave them in the comments below, okay? So far I have visiting gardens, giving and eating flowers, making pollinator habitats, watering the things that you want to bloom in life, and I'll touch on that in a second, seed bombing, and making floral decorations. So again, this is more a day that's about being connected to your environment, being connected to nature, not necessarily just about the idea of like, I love you, so I bought you this really expensive card or whatever. And one of the things that I mentioned was making pollinator habits. So we don't have flowers if we don't have pollinators. We don't have fruit if we don't have pollinators. Our pollinators are actually helping us keep this whole process alive, right? And our food industry requires pollinators. Our gardening requires pollinators. So I think that on Day of Flowers it would be really nice if you could like find ways to support your local pollinators, whether that is making bee habitats or planting native flowers in a garden. So at one point I saw people making really cute seed bombs with native flowers, of course, and you can throw these in empty lots. Something else that I've done at one point was make little flowers out of recycled paper. So you take paper pulp and you make, you just like make paper. You can also use, I think I additionally use dryer lint. So again, this is a very sustainable holiday. I made recycled paper, and then in the pulp for the paper, I mixed seeds and I shaped those into little hearts. And then once it was dry, I punched a hole in the hearts, attached green floral wire, and basically made a little bouquet of paper hearts that when you tore them up and threw them away, they would plant seeds, which I think is like so sweet. Like, this is my affection for you, and it grows flowers, like, very adorable. Get together with your friends, draw flowers, paint flowers, meditate on flowers. I also think that it's like a great thing for well-being and health. A lot of people are bummed out about Valentine's Day, feeling left out or feeling superficial, having a lot of negative associations. I myself have a lot of memories feeling more like having to figure out what would be something that was good enough to do for my partner. Like if I didn't do it, and like my partner never made me feel like that, but Valentine's Day made me feel like that. And that's just all part of the marketing, right? So the menu for Day of Flowering or Blooming Day is, of course, edible flowers. Now, another part of this is that it's going to reconnect you with the plants around you. It's going to get you into herbology. Day of Flowers is a very herbologist holiday. And you have to find out what flowers are edible. And I guarantee you that unless you're a passionate herbalist already, there are more edible flowers than you know about, which is awesome. And they can be put in salads. They can be mixed down into jams, which are delicious. Rose petal jam is fantastic. As an aside, if you want to buy roses, for that, make sure that they're not covered in pesticides. But anyway, so you have flowers, edible flowers, honey and nectar, like fruit juices, fruit nectars, fruit itself, seeds like amaranth, chia, and herbs, so springy herbs. And from that, I would love if you sat down and thought of a menu or a dish that you would like to make. You can notice these things are all very like invigorating, beautiful foods that bring a lot of high vibrational energy to you. And I think that it's a great thing to do. You'll hear a lot of people once at the start of the year talk about like detoxing or eating really light. I think that's one of the things where people start to turn to that for New Year's and start like saying, oh, you know, for New Year, I'm going to go on a diet. Now, I don't really support dieting. I do support people tapping into their natural instincts, and it is actually very natural for humans to start eating lighter in the spring, because in the spring is when a lot of vitamin-rich but like lighter foods become available, because you start having, again, these herbs, flowers, berries start coming back, the fruits start coming back, and people will start to eat them because now they have access to them. And one of the things that I think is very interesting about this like natural eating cycle, because another thing that I definitely always support is the fact that a lot of fall and winter foods are very heavy. People talk, oh, I'll gain weight. You're supposed to. We are supposed to be eating heavier things that keep us from starving in the winter, right? So in the fall, we really focus on kind of putting weight on, but also eating things that have a lot of minerals in them. And then in the winter, we tend to just eat whatever will really last. And that is why come spring, we naturally are inclined to start eating things that kind of flush out our system, get everything running again, because maybe we eat a lot of like dried meats, lots of nuts and seeds, breads and grains throughout the colder months. So personally, every time I do Day of Flowers, I feel very like refreshed. It is such a beautiful, refreshing holiday. It feels very freeing. It's a very liberating holiday. It feels honestly really nice to move away from the commercialism of it all. I think that this holiday is more focused on like creative energy. Again, that's what flowers are. Flowers are this initial energy that is put out, that it invites the pollinators, it invites the reproductive process, that invites the fruit making. And we tap into this beautiful creative energy when we participate in Day of Flowers. It's also something that is more like community oriented, or can be, allows itself to be more community oriented. You could have a bunch of people getting together, doing a party where they make flower garlands and they make seed bombs, and then they take those back to their houses or their neighborhoods and put them wherever they want. You know, we could talk about starting a new garden. You can get your friends together, do Day of Flowers where you have a floral menu. Maybe you have like maybe you have lavender lemon tea cakes and rose tea, while you all organize seeds and divvy out packets of seeds to each other so that you can go home and plant your spring gardens. This is, I'm so excited about it. It's really more about the connection. Again, I keep saying connection, 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 and rebirth, reinitiation, a restart, a freshness. It's about co-creative actions and not necessarily material gifts. And that's the other thing, that with its newness and its nature, and especially the first one, which I'll touch on in a second, it's harder to commercialize. Yeah, you may buy things, maybe you buy seeds or whatever, but it's not the same thing as buying a bunch of marked up Valentine's Day champagne bottles, teddy bears, lingerie, whatever it is, gift baskets. It's gonna instantly be something that is much more difficult for capitalism to bank on, because some of the stuff that you can make yourself, you can recycle paper and make these little recycled paper seed bomb scraps. You can, again, making seed bombs themselves is not expensive. You getting together with your friends and getting some simple art supplies and doing some crafts, much, much cheaper. Again, harder to commercialize because there's no one thing that you need to be doing. Taking the time to find out what flowers are edible, which ones you have access to, maybe going on a hike to see if you can find local flowers, edible or non, in your area. What's blooming at this time of the year? What's blooming for you in February 13th? And when I mentioned also that to talk about watering what you want to bloom. So this is, I guess, the note that I'm going to close out on. I'm huge on intention. I think that intentionality that is guided by seasonality is, to me, religious. Like, it's very much like my path and my way of life. And I'm so thankful when there are events in time that help cue us into what is the best thing to do right now to make the best out of my moment, my life, my being, right? And on Day of Flowers, the reflective prompt is this: what do you want to bloom for you this year? And how could you water that? So while you sip chrysanthemum tea or maybe eat quesadillas de flor de calabaza, you can sit and journal or discuss with your friends. What is it that you want to bloom this year, and how can you water it? What are some ways that you can plant that seed? What does it look like to actually do that and embody that? How can you approach this with a sense of beauty and gratitude and enjoyment rather than pressure and criticism? What are the actual results of love in ourselves, in our lives, with each other, in our community? Love is something that grows. Love is something that comes from deep spreading roots. Love is something that fruits. Love is not necessarily something that comes with a box of a dozen chocolates. And even with roses, somebody could buy you a dozen roses. Somebody could buy you that box of chocolates. Somebody can get you that teddy bear. But it doesn't mean that what they have for you has roots, which is also why so many people break up around Valentine's Day. Just putting that out there. So this has been my bid on convincing you to ditch Valentine's Day. Ditch the store displays, ditch the sales, ditch the commercialism. If you want to buy chocolates after the fact, I'm not going to stop you, but please remember that the majority of chocolate producers source their stuff basically illegally. There are child laborers and impoverished farmers in the supply chain, and that's what's required to get chocolate to you at a price that you think is fair. Chocolate is actually worth much, much more than what we tend to pay for it, but empires have a way of manipulating things so that they can get what they want without paying a fair price. And at the end of the day, that's not really romantic, is it? The amount of plastic waste from faux fur, plushies, and lingerie that you wear once maybe, and limited edition lotions, that all ends up in a landfill. And pretty much every plastic item that has ever been created, and plastic is fairly new when it comes to the timeline of things, still exists with us on this planet today because it does not biodegrade in a reasonable time whatsoever. It takes thousands of years. And is that romantic? Is it really romantic? Is that what makes us feel love? Or would we feel more love if we ourselves could connect to being the source of that energy and connect to receiving that energy from the earth, from the spring, from the flowers, from the bees and the pollinators, from the beautiful herbs, from the plants that are offered to us, that are also put into our care to steward? Day of Flowers is more about reconnecting with why we even celebrate such a love-oriented holiday in the spring. It's reconnecting us to our relationship to the sun, to the seasons, to the land around us. And so I encourage you to break up with Valentine's Day, do Blooming Day instead, and find and develop rituals and activities and meals that you think are fantastic, that have to do with who you are, what you like, and where you live in a way that you truly enjoy. And I want all of us to reconnect to our creative energy and detach from commercialist, consumerist capitalism. Because at the end of the day, that's not what love is all about. Oh my God, I almost forgot. Don't go. I did not tell you my Day of Flowers menu. So some of you know, if you've been following me for the past few years, I used to post a lot of cooking and recipe content. I love cooking, love sharing recipes, and with these past 2 years of moving place to place and then having to readjust to having different foods available to me to make, different ingredients available to make, I just did not do like any food content. There have been a few recipes and that's it. Whereas if you look back on my blog, there were all kinds of soups and smoothies and baked oatmeals and dishes and fantastic stuff. So let me tell you what I plan to eat on Day of Flowering. And I say eat because not everything is going to be something that I make, but I will give details about that. So for breakfast, I want to make taltequeras de betabel con rosas y amaranto, which were the ones that I was talking about earlier. I went to the mercado in Tepoztlan and they were serving them and they're really good. And I don't think they're the most popular food there, largely because it's a pre-Hispanic food. They, like a lot of pre-colonial foods across the world, are not oriented around meat. So they tend to just be made out of different grains and herbs and petals. In some cases, they had chapulines, which are crickets, which I also have one of those. Very good. So anyway, breakfast is taltequeres y betabel con rosas y amaranto with lemon zest I wanted to put on top. So this is like a nice pink cake made out of beet and rose petals with a little bit of amaranth grain. I'm also thinking of baked hawthorn. So hawthorn is the apple family hawthorns, but they sell them here, and they have these like little yellow hawthorns that I think would be really nice to kind of just bake with honey and cinnamon. And then a cardamom lavender latte. Now, I have not been a huge coffee drinker for most of my life, especially because I can be a little high strung, or used to be. And so for the longest time, I just like avoided coffee because it was way too intense for me, like espresso, lattes, and things like that. But I've come back to them recently and realized, oh, I have no problem with coffee. And therefore, I only recently discovered lavender lattes. So I went to this restaurant, I had this time that had lavender lattes, and it was really incredible. And I immediately went home and recreated something to more of my liking. So it's rose petals, lavender, and anise seed, like Chinese star anise. Put that in the water to start the coffee and then make the coffee. So you could do this with espresso too. Think that you have to run that through the water and then run that water through the espresso and then make your latte as regular. So anyway, that's breakfast. Lunch, flautas de flor de Jamaica, ensalada con germinados in nasturtium, cherry tomatoes. So I'm mixing English and Spanish. For those of you who don't know, I moved to Mexico and I generally only speak Spanish during the day if I'm not talking to like my friends from the States. I don't really know a lot of other Americans here. I don't really speak English. There are a lot of Mexicans that I know that speak English and we just speak Spanish because I need to learn Spanish. But what I was just saying is that I wanted to also make a salad. So flautas de flor de Jamaica. Here, one of the things that I love the most is when Jamaica is used as a savory, like a taco filling. So it's basically like boiled down, cooked out so it's not as tart, and then boiled in a broth and seasoned. And it is so good. So good. So of course then you roll it up in a tortilla and you fry it so it's crispy on the outside. It's full of this warm, savory, still kind of tangy, meaty fruit pulp, because Jamaica is actually not the petals. It's not the hibiscus petals. It's the actual like ovum part of the fruit that kind of swells up, and it's very like juicy. And this has been used in Africa and the Caribbean as a tea. It's very good for you. That's the other thing. There are so many health benefits to a lot of these flowers. So the salad that I mentioned was a sprouts salad. So like, alfalfa sprouts, beet sprouts with nasturtium, which is orange or red kind of spicy flour, and cherry tomatoes. And then a rosemary, lemon, cucumber, and cempasúchil tonic. So marigold, cempasúchil is marigolds, and marigold is a medicinal flower. It can be used to make salves, but it is also used here in like teas. I've seen it put in beers and even like as a flavoring for pastries. And I want to put that into a tonic to get some of those sort of healing properties of the flower itself into a tonic with cucumber, rosemary. Sounds very refreshing, no? For dinner, quesadillas de flor de calabaza con queso, lavender, honey, marshmallows with butterfly pea flour powder. So I saw a recipe recently for marshmallows, and they were talking about how if you make marshmallows the original way, they are very gut healing because the demulcent, mucilaginous properties of the marshmallow root can help soothe inflammation in the GI tract, which is nice at any time of the year. But I also really love foods where we're really focusing on their medicinal properties because food is medicine. So I'm thinking of making lavender honey marshmallows and dusting them with a nice blue powder. I'm thinking because a lot of times marshmallows are very sticky, and in order to keep them from all sticking to each other, they're regularly dusted with something like cornstarch or powdered sugar. I don't really feel like using powdered sugar or cornstarch. I think it would be cool if we use the opportunity for a powder to add more nutrients. The question is, though, will it behave the same way? Cornstarch is really great to use because it absorbs moisture in a certain way that keeps itself dry and slippery and silky, right? I'm not sure if butterfly pea flower powder will do the same, but we'll find out. And then for the dessert with dinner, a flax, hemp, and black sesame atole with coconut milk. So as you can see, because I live in Mexico, a lot of the foods that I'm thinking about are oriented around Mexican gastronomy, and that's of course because that's the culture that I'm in. That is the foods that I have available to me. That's what my life is like right now when it blooms. And also because I love atole, as my clients know, a lot of times, especially when somebody is stressed out, I will suggest some sort of like a rich, milky porridge or beverage. One of the ones that I use a lot is something called lele, which is a mixture of maize, like ground corn, and coconut milk. And it has this heaviness, this richness, this sweetness and savoriness that all together kind of has this very like breast milky vibe to it, which is extremely nurturing to an exhausted nervous system. So I love atole the same way that I love dumplings, like any country's dumpling. If you take dough and you put something inside, I think that's fantastic. My other favorite thing is like a vegetable pancake. Again, if you take dough and you fill it with herbs and vegetables and you fry it, that's incredible. So my top three, a ball of dough full of stuff, a pancake full of veggies, or some kind of grainy porridge or beverage. And atole is obviously one of those. But atole comes in hundreds of different types. And I recently had an atole that was basically called like a remineralizing atole, and it had like 5 different types of seeds in it, and it was so good. So I think that would be a great thing to close the day out, like this very deeply nourishing thing, especially because some of the foods, depending on how you eat and what your caloric needs are, may seem kind of light, but we're still going to close out on something that's deeply comforting, rich, and nourishing. And so I plan like hemp seeds, black sesame seeds. They're so good for you. Pumpkin seeds you can use. And again, depending on what you like maybe you want to use peanuts, maybe you want to use almonds, maybe you want to use, rice and coconut and pecan. You can do any of that, grind it up, boil it with your seasonings and make an atole the way that you want. Sweeten it with honey or nectar or sugar, whatever it is to your liking. So that is the actual end of my video. Let's cut to the actual end. Peace. Thanks for watching.
Now smile. Place your hand on your chest and take a deep breath. Peace.